There are things out there, creatures, monsters, ghouls and spirits, beings that fall outside the realm of visible truth, beyond the confines of our basic reality. They lurk in the dark, haunt the recesses of our minds, and stir our curiosity in the unusual and weird. They are taboo topics, stories that we tell around the campfire and folklore passed down from our ancestors. We've been taught that these things don't exist, that they are merely myth and legend. Or are they? Welcome to the Occult Archives. I'm your host and spooky librarian, E.M. Moon, but feel free to refer to me as E. Here lies a space beyond all spaces, a library full of arcane information enough to drive any normal person mad. If you can think of it, if you can question it, the archives probably have what you seek. I'm going to put a big old content warning on this episode since these conspiracies involve talk around sex trafficking, mostly of children, and talk of police brutality and murder. This may be severely triggering for some, so if it is, please sit this one out and join me for the next episode. Also, I am a conspiracy nut, but only in the sense that I enjoy reading about them and playing with different scenarios. With that being said, these aren't the types of conspiracies I enjoy, and I think these in particular are harmful and dangerous. Because this episode and its content is a heated topic for me, there will most likely be a fair bit of colorful language and cussing on my part. My views are just that, mine, and they may cause me to lose listeners, but I'm not too concerned about that. I'm more concerned with the truth. Before I get down to tonight's story, I know I already made a disclaimer in the beginning of the episode, but I also want to say that I'm slightly under the weather, if you can't tell by my voice, so I apologize for sounding so harsh and raspy, and I'll do my best to enunciate and talk clearly, but it is what it is, and I guess it's kind of appropriate since we're talking about all the fuckery of 2020. So let's go ahead and get started. What may have felt like the worst and simultaneously the longest year that a lot of us have lived through is finally over. It's 2021. But just because the Earth made another complete orbit around the sun and the number changed on the calendar doesn't mean that the shit we went through this past year just disappears and all the crap that came with it goes the way of the dodo. But things really aren't going to change anytime soon. We have to continue to work and dismantle all the outdated structures that continue to keep us pinned down, dumbed down, and self-destructive. I know it seems like I'm starting off this episode on a bleak note, but I have my reasons. I may be stuck down here in the archives, the ultimate social distancing, if I might add, but I'm still human, and watching the circus act that was this last 4 years for America, and especially this last year alone, has taught me so many things and lit a fire under my ass to try and do something more than what I was doing. Alas, like I said, I'm stuck here. So I talk a lot from behind a computer screen because it's the only way to communicate with the world at large from here. I have access to all sorts of information down here in the archives that would blow most of your minds. But the internet is something that the original archivists would have thrown a fit about. Not just because it is so full of information right at your fingertips, but because of how much disinformation humans have access to, and then refuse to look at actual scientific or factual proof in favor of fake news and conspiracy theories. In 2020, and the several years prior, we're at no shortage of crazy freaking conspiracy theories. I had no problem finding a buttload of crazy quote-unquote facts that are nuttier than a squirrel's nest but don't have a lick of proof to back them up. Yet you turn on a television, hop on Facebook, or access YouTube, and there's a scary amount of people talking or posting about these supposed facts, as if they were actual truth. And people actually believe and follow this crap, as if it were gospel. Some of them are just crazy enough for us to laugh at and walk away, while others have infiltrated our very government and the people that hold office within it. These sorts of things are really no joke. Let's take a ride on the Wayback Machine to 4 years ago, the year that Trump won the presidential election in the United States. A story cropped up during March of 2016 when the personal email account of John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, was hacked in a phishing attack. WikiLeaks then published these emails in November of 2016. Somehow, certain people dug really, and I mean really, deep into the emails and claimed that there were coded messages connected with several high-ranking Democratic officials and U.S. restaurants with an alleged human trafficking and child sex ring. prior to the official leak, a Twitter account posting white supremacist content stated that it was run by a New York lawyer and falsely claimed that the NYPD had discovered a pedophilia ring that was supposedly linked to members of the Democratic Party while searching through Anthony Weiner, a convicted sex offender's emails. Throughout October and into November of that year, Podesta's emails were published publicly, and proponents of the conspiracy theory who read the emails claimed that they allegedly contained coded words for pedophilia and human trafficking. I won't go into all the code words that they are talking about, but you can easily look them up at your leisure. Somehow a restaurant called Comet Ping Pong in Washington, D.C. got flagged as one of these sex trafficking restaurants, and the conspiracy surrounding it was spread all over the internet across 4chan, 8chan, and Twitter, and eventually ended up on numerous conservative and pro-Trump websites and news outlets. This theory had now gone so far down the rabbit hole that claims were being made that meetings were held at Comet Ping Pong for satanic ritual abuse. Let's get something straight here. If you know anything about Satanists, especially the Satanic Temple, you know how they regularly speak out against abuse, especially child abuse, since there are so many allegations of it in the Catholic Church, a religion that is a total 180 from Satanism. They actively call these sorts of things out and will be quick to banish a member of the temple that may be involved in such allegations. They are advocates of the people, but look at the audience who eats this conspiracy up. Not exactly people that are open to different religions, least of all one with the name Satan in it. But back to Comet Ping Pong. One Reddit user, mere days before the 2016 presidential election, posted supposed Pizzagate, as it had been dubbed, evidence documents that were removed from the website sometime between November 4th and 21st. It alleged Comet Ping Pong's involvement, stating, "Everyone associated with the business is making semi-overt, semi-tongue-in-cheek, and semi-sarcastic inferences towards sex with minors. The artists that work for the business also generate nothing but cultish imagery of disembodiment, blood, beheading, sex, and of course, pizza." Of course, this story was picked up by other fake news websites like Space Cadet Alex Jones's InfoWars, Planet Free Will, and The Vigilant Citizen, and of course was promoted even further by a bunch of far-right activists who never really have any idea what they are talking about at this point. The misinformation and outright lies were smeared everywhere, with more and more people jumping on the bandwagon. Not long after, Comet Ping Pong's owner, James Alefantis, started receiving hundreds of death threats from adherents to the conspiracy theory. He and his staff were being harassed continuously, threatened on social media, and even given negative Yelp reviews, all because of this unfounded conspiracy. After numerous and continued death threats, the restaurant decided to increase its security on the premises, just in case. On December 4th, 2016, Edgar Madison Welch of Salisbury, North Carolina, entered Comet Ping Pong with a semi-automatic rifle and fired 3 rounds inside the building, hitting a wall, a desk, and a door, before he was detained and arrested. Luckily, no one was injured. In addition to the rifle, the police also seized a Colt .38 caliber handgun, a shotgun, and a folding knife from Welch's car and his person. Welch's story to the police was that he planned to self-investigate the conspiracy theory, hoping to be heralded a hero, a savior of children, but was subsequently charged with assault with a deadly weapon, carrying a pistol without a license, unlawful discharge of a firearm, and carrying a rifle or shotgun outside the home or business. While in custody, Welch later stated that he regretted how he handled the situation, but did not dismiss the conspiracy theory and rejected the description of it as being fake news. The rumors surrounding the business was debunked by the Metropolitan Police Department of the District of Columbia, and other sources such as the New York Times and Snopes were among others to do the same. Welch was then sentenced on June 22nd of 2017 to 4 years in prison for his offenses. And they weren't the only restaurants to receive similar harassment, including establishments in Brooklyn, Austin, Texas, and even another restaurant local to Comet Ping Pong. This didn't seem to deter true believers, though. Andrew Bogut, a former Australian professional basketball player, was among those that promoted this conspiracy theory, and after recovering from a knee injury in December 30th of 2016, members of the subreddit The Donald promoted even another false theory that Bogut's injury was somehow connected to his support of Pizzagate. Please. What's even more fucked up is the fact that Jonathan Albright, an assistant professor of media analytics at Elon University in North Carolina, said that a disproportionate number of tweets about Pizzagate came from the Czech Republic, Cyprus, and Vietnam, and that some of the most frequent retweeters were actually bots. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Some Pizzagate proponents then took it a step further and evolved the conspiracy theory to involve the government. I mean, it was a matter of time. And the name changed to Pedogate. According to this specific theory, a satanic cabal of elites of the New World Order operates international child sex trafficking rings. By June of 2020, this far-fetched theory found renewed popularity in TikTok, where users were tagging videos with hashtag Pizzagate and reaching over 80 million views. The conspiracy has been widely discredited and debunked, yet there remains a ridiculous amount of people who can't think for themselves or accept facts and evidence, or the lack thereof. Numerous news outlets and newspapers have also proved the conspiracy theory to hold no merit, including the Huffington Post, Fox News, CNN, and the Los Angeles Times. They've all declared it to be a work of fiction, while thoroughly fact-checking and investigating. Much of the purported evidence cited by these conspiracy theorists have been taken from entirely different sources and made to appear as if it supported the conspiracy. Basically, they Googled a bunch of shit, thought it fit their agenda, and then reposted it as fact. Images of children, of family, and friends of the Comet Ping Pong restaurant were grabbed from social media sites and then recirculated, claiming to be photos of victims. On December 10, 2016, the New York Times published an article that analyzed the theory's claims. They emphasized that theorists link the conspiracy to Comet Ping Pong through similarities between company logos and symbols related to Satanism and pedophilia. However, the Times noted similarities were also found in the logos of a number of unrelated companies, such as AOL, Time Warner, and MSN. Theorists claimed an underground network beneath Comet Ping Pong. The restaurant has no basement, however, and the picture used to support this claim was taken in another facility. Theorists claim to have a picture of restaurant owner Alefantis wearing a t-shirt endorsing pedophilia. However, the image was of another person, and the shirt, which read J'ai heart, like j'adore, les enfants, was actually a reference to the Les Enfants Cafe Bar in D.C., whose owner was pictured in the image, and which itself is named after Pierre Charles Les Enfants. I told you guys I can't French. The designer of much of the layout of Washington, D.C. Theorists claim John and Tony Podesta kidnapped Madeleine McCann, a little girl who had been kidnapped from her bed while on holiday in Portugal, which is a whole nother episode in and of itself, using police sketches that were, in fact, two sketches of the same suspect taken from the descriptions of two different eyewitnesses. There have been no alleged victims that have come forward and absolutely no physical evidence that couldn't be debunked as fake. Despite the conspiracy theory being debunked, it continues to spread on social media, with over 1 million posts using hashtag Pizzagate on Twitter since November of 2016. That figure is from Wikipedia, so it could be higher now, especially after the way 2020 went. An individual named Stephanie McWilliams wrote an article promoting the conspiracy that was subsequently reported by the Toronto Star, where she says, "I really have no regrets, and it's honestly really grown our audience. Pizzagate," she said, "is two worlds clashing. People don't trust the mainstream media anymore, but it's true that people shouldn't take the alternative media as truth either. Don't listen to them when they tell you the Kool-Aid is poisonous, but also don't drink too much of the Kool-Aid and you'll be fine." Fine. Sound advice. Whatever. The rampant misinformation and actual fake news on the situation was so bad that even Hillary Clinton responded to the conspiracy theory on December 8, 2016, speaking about the dangers of fake news websites that continue to spread such blatant lies and conspiracy theories. She said, "The epidemic of malicious fake news and fake propaganda that flooded social media over the past year. It's now clear that so-called fake news can have real-world consequences." She had no idea how true these words would become. Fast forward a bit to the emergence of QAnon and the Save Our Children hashtag that followed the death of Jeffrey Epstein. Just screwed that one right off the rip. We all know who Epstein is, especially if you are active on social media and love memes, but we're going to look at him for just a bit so all this insanity makes better sense. Epstein was arrested in New York on July 6th of 2019 on multiple charges, including sex trafficking, and placed at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan. Of course, he pleaded not guilty, but in 2008 he was brought up on similar charges in Florida, but was able to escape federal charges because of a plea deal, and let's be honest, he had a fuck ton of money. Under the provisions of this plea deal, he actually pleaded guilty to 2 state felony charges, paid restitution to 36 victims identified by the FBI, and then had to register as a sex offender in Florida and New York. That was it. That was his only punishment for 36 victims. Thankfully, Epstein was denied bail on the most recent charges, even after offering $600,000 to be able to wear an ankle tracker at his New York City townhouse. He was deemed as a flight risk due to his 20 international flights in the prior 18 months. I guess the police learned their lesson about releasing scum like Epstein into the world, but that is neither here nor there right now. Epstein tried to appeal this bail denial decision, but appeal was still pending at the time of his death. On August 10th of 2019, Epstein was found unresponsive in his cell at the correctional center. Prison guards attempted to perform CPR, but he was transported in cardiac arrest to the New York Downtown Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 6:39 a.m. The medical examiner ruled Epstein's death as suicide by hanging, even though his lawyers challenged this finding and opened up their own investigation using pathologist Michael Baden. Now, your average person would look at the coroner's findings and think, yeah, that sounds legit. He was a disgusting pedophile, and he knew that he wasn't going to be able to bargain his way out of this one. The only way out for him would be death. Of course, as a result of Epstein's death, all charges against him were dismissed, and ongoing sex trafficking investigations shifted attention to his alleged associates, most notably purported Madam Ghislaine Maxwell, who was eventually arrested in July of 2020. I can never say her name right, and I don't even really care. But Attorney General William Barr expressed suspicion surrounding his death, describing it as a perfect storm of screw-ups. Both the FBI and Department of Justice's Inspector General began an investigation into Epstein's death and later charged the guards on duty that night with multiple counts of conspiracy and record falsification. Due to violations of normal jail procedures on that night, the alleged malfunction of 2 separate cameras in front of his cell, and Epstein's claims of having compromising information about powerful figures, the death began to generate speculation and, of course, conspiracy theories about the possibility that Epstein hadn't in fact committed suicide, but had actually been murdered. But the conspiracy theories didn't stop there. Some unfounded claims say that Epstein's death was actually feigned. This led to the Epstein didn't kill himself meme, and according to a public opinion poll, a majority of Americans believe that Epstein was in fact murdered. Okay, this aspect of the conspiracy theory isn't so far-fetched. Just like the coroner's findings of suicide, murder wouldn't necessarily be off the table if Epstein indeed had proof of other high-profile people being involved in international sex trafficking and planned on releasing it to hopefully get himself another plea deal. Those people probably wouldn't mind if he was dead. Add the guards and their charges, and we potentially have a vigilante murder where the police, in a sense, took matters into their own hands. Both theories are theoretically plausible. Epstein feigning his own death is a little more involved and dramatic, making it less feasible, though an unnamed source claims that Epstein actually staged the incident in order to be transferred, potentially due to a prior incident. This is testimony from Epstein's lawyer regarding the first-time suicide attempt, that Epstein told him that he had been assaulted by his cellmate, who was a multiple murderer and drug conspiracy suspect, Tartaglione, who was questioned by prison officials but denied harming Epstein, saying that he actually tried to save him instead. Regardless, after this incident, Epstein believed that it was an attack on his life, and that there was a high probability that he would be murdered in prison. The result of this incident initially got him placed on suicide watch. He was put in an observation cell surrounded by windows where the lights were left on and any devices that he could use to kill himself were not permitted. After only 6 days, psych staff dismissed Epstein from suicide watch, following a psychiatric examination after he claimed that it was Tartaglione who roughed him up, not an actual suicide attempt. Epstein was then returned to the special housing unit, where he was supposed to have a cellmate and be checked on every 30 minutes. He was also reportedly depositing funds into other prisoners' accounts as a way to gain favor or buy protection. A paper note was also found in his cell after his death, where in it he complained about large bugs crawling on his body, guard Tova Noel giving him burnt food, and another guard intentionally locking him in a shower cell without clothes for an hour. He's lucky that's the least he had to deal with, considering who he was and why he was in there. Epstein's death was the first ruled a suicide at the MCC in over 14 years. Michael Baden questioned whether or not Epstein, who was almost 6 feet and weighed 185 pounds, could even have been able to hang himself from the lower bunk like he did. Photos taken after death at the scene showed bottles and medicine standing upright in the top bunk, and one of the inmates in the prison described the sheets there as paper level, not strong enough, to support someone's body that way. Bain also questioned why Epstein didn't use other materials available to him that were stronger, such as the wires and tubes from a sleep apnea machine nearby. The autopsy reported that Epstein's hyoid bone was broken in his neck, which can occur in suicide of the elderly, but is generally seen in victims of homicide by strangulation. To be honest, there is actually pretty decent evidence for murder in this case, and I for one wouldn't be at all surprised if more solid evidence was uncovered that supported this theory. But Epstein died in 2019. What does it have to do with the fuckery of 2020? Well, I'm going to tell you. Remember when I mentioned QAnon and the Save Our Children hashtag? Well, this didn't start in 2020 either, but I'm building up to things. Not long after the Pizzagate shit reared its factless head, the QAnon conspiracy began in October of 2017 with a post on the anonymous image board 4chan by Q. Or I think it was Q something Patriot. I don't give a fuck enough to remember all that. But this person was presumably an American, though is most likely become a group of people acting under the same name. Q claimed to be a high-level government official with Q clearance, which is DOE security clearance required to access all sorts of top-secret and restricted data and information. And this individual had access to information involving the Trump administration and its opponents in the United States. NBC reported that 3 idiots took this original Q post and spread it far and wide across the land of media platforms to build an internet following for profit. Here is where a well-rounded, intelligent individual goes, oh, there it is, but never mind us. The following is made up mainly of Trump supporters who refer to the storm and the Great Awakening. QAnon's vocabulary and ideologies are closely related to the religious concepts of millenarianism, whatever, which is a belief in a coming fundamental transformation of society, after which all things will be changed, and apocalypticism, these words are weird, y'all, I'm sorry, which is a religious belief that there will be an apocalypse and the end of the world is imminent. So basically, these people believe in crazy end times revelation shit, is what I'm trying to get at with these words that my mouth won't let me pronounce right now. So, this leads the group to be sometimes construed as an emerging religious movement, where its adherents, while seeing Trump as a flawed Christian, also view him as a messiah sent by God. More like Antichrist. But I digress. According to Travis View, who has studied QAnon and written about it extensively for the Washington Post, the essence of the conspiracy theory is that there is a worldwide cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles who rule the world, essentially, and control everything. They control politicians, and they control the media. They control Hollywood, and they cover up their existence, essentially. And they would have continued ruling the world were it not for the election of President Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump in this conspiracy theory knows all about the evil cabal's wrongdoings. But one of the reasons that Donald Trump was elected was to put an end to them, basically. And now we would be ignorant of this behind-the-scenes battle of Donald Trump in the U.S. military, that everyone backs him in the evil cabal, were it not for Q. And what Q is basically a poster on 4chan, who later moved to 8chan, who reveals details about this secret behind-the-scenes battle, and also secrets about the cabal, about what the cabal is doing, and also the mass sort of upcoming arrest events through these posts. Sorry, I kind of mushed my way through that, but the excerpt from this was kind of worded weird. But followers of QAnon also believe that there is an imminent event known as the Storm, as I mentioned, when thousands of members of the cabal will be arrested and possibly sent to Guantanamo Bay prison or face military tribunals, and then the U.S. military will brutally take over the country, the result being salvation and utopia on Earth. Okay, this is a lot to unpack, and I hate unpacking, especially when it leaves me feeling like I've somehow lost important brain cells doing so. Yet again, we have the involvement of your average right-wing conservative. More allegations and rumors about satanic child sex traffickers, 4chan, 8chan, and Donald Trump. All of this shit started around the time of his election. I can't fall too deep down this rabbit hole because y'all don't want to listen to me talk that long, and I really don't want to talk that long. But Q kind of presents itself as a Nostradamus of the New Age, with all sorts of predictions surrounding politics in the United States. Their first prediction being that Hillary Clinton was about to be arrested and would attempt to flee the country. Of course, this prediction failed, just like a slew of others that Q has made, including, I'm going to give you guys a list. The quote-unquote storm would take place on November 3rd, 2017. there was no notable events in U.S. politics on that day. A major event involving the Department of Defense would take place on February 1st, 2018. That didn't happen. People targeted by the president would commit suicide en masse on February 10th, 2018. No prominent people committed suicide that day. There would be a car bombing in London around February 16th, 2018. Except there was no bombing. The Trump military parade would never be forgotten. The parade was canceled, so definitely won't forget that. The Five Eyes, an international intelligence alliance, won't be around much longer. To this day, it is yet to be terminated. Something major would happen in Chongqing, China on April 10th, 2018. Nothing notable happened there that day. There would be a bombshell revelation about North Korea in May 2018. Except there were no notable developments with that. A smoking gun video of Hillary Clinton would emerge in March 2018. No fucking video. There's still more, guys. There's like 3 more. Multiple failed predictions that John McCain would resign from the U.S. Senate. McCain did not resign. Multiple failed predictions that Mark Zuckerberg would leave Facebook and flee the United States. Zuckerberg remains the CEO of Facebook. Zuckerberg remains the CEO of Facebook. Multiple failed predictions that Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey would be forced to resign, while Dorsey still remains the CEO of Twitter. And lastly, multiple failed predictions that something big would happen, or the truth would emerge next week. How many next weeks have we had? And that's just the failed predictions. There are also numerous baseless claims that have been made by QAnon, and this is where it starts to get real, too weird for me, which is saying something considering. So buckle up, buttercups, because these claims are going to make you question humanity's future. Q claimed that the CIA installed North Korea leader Kim Jong-un as a puppet ruler, that U.S. Representative former Democratic National Committee chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz supposedly hired Salvadoran gang MS-13 to murder DNC staffer Seth Rich, whose death was actually suspected to be the result of attempted robbery by unknown perpetrators. There was also an apparent suggestion that German Chancellor Angela Merkel is actually Adolf Hitler's granddaughter. Q falsely claimed that each mass shooting is a false flag attack organized by the cabal, and that Obama, Hillary Clinton, George Soros, and others are planning a coup against Trump and are involved in an international child sex trafficking ring that also has links to Epstein and his island. Supposedly, the Mueller investigation was actually a counter-coup led by Trump, who pretended to conspire with Russia in order to hire Mueller to secretly investigate the Democrats. Oh, and certain Hollywood stars are pedophiles, and that the Rothschild family leads a satanic cult. This isn't the first time political allegations such as these have circulated since the 1970s, but the big difference was that the narrative then painted the Republicans as the villains, not the elite Democrats. These claims and predictions that never came to fruition are explained away by Q saying that these false claims and incorrect predictions are deliberate, claiming that disinformation is necessary. This has led an Australian psychologist, Stephen Lewandowski, to emphasize the self-sealing quality of the conspiracy theory, highlighting its anonymous purveyor's use of plausible deniability and noting that evidence against it can become evidence of its validity in the minds of believers. Meaning that the more you try to disprove the nonsense, the more its believers adhere to it because they think disprovers just want to cover it all up. But I mean, of course they would, considering that a lot of these QAnon theorists have touted drinking an industrial bleach known as MMS, or miracle mineral solution, as a miracle cure for COVID-19. I don't know. Maybe it's more effective for them than a UV light up the bum. Honestly surprised there was no turpentine involved. Maybe a little urine in the bloodstream? Okay, I'm getting off topic, and this isn't about anti-vaxxer lunacy, though I suspect some intersection between those groups, QAnon and the conservatives. Now, all of these narratives finally crossed paths in 2020 and honestly created some sort of super conspiracy of mindless proportions. Pizzagate, Epstein's charges and subsequent death, and the emergence of QAnon. All of these conspiracies involve children that are being abducted in large numbers to supply a child sex trafficking ring. Before I go further, let me say that while I think these conspiracies are absurd and laughable, sex trafficking, especially that of children, is a real actual problem that we are dealing with, and there are many forces at play to find these rings and liberate victims. There is actual facts and proof in these situations, though, unlike all the shit that QAnon spews. By 2020, some followers of QAnon began using the hashtag Save the Children. That's what it started with, Save the Children. Was actually the trademark name for the child welfare organization Save the Children, which led to an August 7th statement of that year by Save the Children on the authorized use of its name in campaigns. Of course, QAnon conspirators weren't using the hashtag in the same way. They were using it to draw attention to their fake news and ridiculous theories of democratic satanic cabals and their Hollywood elite friends trafficking children and performing blood rituals to harvest adrenochrome. Oh, yeah. What is adrenochrome, you ask? Well, according to the conspiracy theories, it's some mystical, magical psychedelic drug that is favored by the global elites, like the Democrats and Hollywood icons, and they use it in their drug-mad satanic rituals. It is supposedly derived from torturing children to harvest their oxidized hormonal fear, sort of like a bastardized version of Monsters, Inc. But QAnon has even said that Monsters, Inc. is Hollywood just towing on itself. Okay. What adrenochrome really is? It's a chemical compound produced by the oxidation of adrenaline, aka epinephrine. There were several small-scale studies conducted in the 50s and 60s of its effects on the brain, and it was reported to trigger psychotic reactions such as thought disorder and derealization. Researchers claim that adrenochrome is a neurotoxic, this is a fun word, psychotomimetic substance, and may play a role in schizophrenia and other mental illnesses. But QAnon was focusing on its fictional aspects, like in the Sisters of Mercy song, Some Girls Wander by Mistake. And apparently they have a lot to say about that, because there is another conspiracy by the name of Frazzle Drip, another reference in that particular song, that took place in 2018 and involved the Google CEO Sundar Pichai, who was questioned by the House Judiciary Committee over the conspiracy. This wonderfully ludicrous theory involved a non-existent video that was supposedly hidden on Anthony Weiner's laptop that showed Hillary Clinton and her one-time aide, Huma Abedin, performing what they call a satanic sacrifice, in which they drank children's blood while wearing masks carved from the skin of their victims' faces. Obviously, no such video exists as far as anyone knows, but I'd say they'll never find anything because it is purely fabrication. The video was codenamed Frazzle Drip and was supposed to depict what they call an adrenochrome harvest. Now, the drug is a fairly common reference in conspiracies involving the far right, and anyone who doesn't know how to Google or fact check. And there are an unnerving amount of these conspiracy theories that involve the drug. All you have to do is hop on Reddit if you want to check it out. But don't. My point there was that Reddit seems to attract these sorts of people, just like 4chan and 8chan, places where they can hide and spew false facts without being kicked from their platforms. Other social media sites like Facebook and Twitter have been actively fact-checking things, especially in 2020, and were removing posts that went against their guidelines, adding disclaimers, and even banning people from the platforms. Even when they changed the Save the Children hashtag to Save Our Children, it was still dealt with similarly. This just made the conspiracy nuts feel more vindicated, however, as these companies were most likely involved in Pizzagate and the cabal and were just trying to cover up anything that could expose them. Sure, whatever you say. If you're thinking, wow, what the fuck? It gets better. Or worse, really. Because this nonsense that Q is spewing, these nutty stories from Pizzagate to save our children, I can't ever say that, isn't anything new, per se. We've seen this before as humans because Q's conspiracies have roots in previously established conspiracy theories. Some on the newer side, others hundreds of years old. Pizzagate seems to be where this really started, but QAnon evolved out of it with many of the same tropes and characters, only the bigger picture behind it has roots in much, much older anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. The whole New World Order, all-powerful, world-ruling cabal is ripped straight out of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is another fake document that purports to expose a secret Jewish plot to control and rule the world that was pretty much used throughout the 20th century to justify the hatred for Jews. The extraction of adrenochrome from the blood of their child victims and the subsequent ingestion of it to extend their lives is a more modernized version of the age-old anti-Semitic blood libel, which is another atrocious accusation that the Jewish people use the blood of Christians in religious rituals, especially in preparation of Passover bread, that cropped up around the time of the Middle Ages and hasn't fucking disappeared. And I'm going to tell you one thing right now. As a Jew, we do not use any blood to make the Passover bread. Anyway, moving on. And considering all the white supremacist Nazi bastards involved in this conspiracy movements, it really isn't a surprise. This isn't anything new. It's just a reboot of the same old racist song and dance, except by now we should fucking know better. Now we know the origins of the bullshit, but how did it affect 2020? Honestly, I'm more inclined to think that our timeline went awry more than I would subscribe to these crackpot theories. But they are a big part of the reason we are having these issues, and they've got Donald Trump wrapped around their little fingers. 2020 started with the discovery of the coronavirus and its ensuing fast spread all over the world in just a few short months. Initially, our idiot-in-chief tried to devise a conspiracy theory of his own by saying that the pandemic was a Democratic hoax, and really, that was the start right there in my humble opinion. That's all his MAGA followers needed to question the motives of everything that was to come in the election year. When it came time for mass testing, people claimed that there were those who received automatic positives and expressed concern over the accuracy of these tests because there were stories circulating that people leaving the test site before their test was even administered were receiving positive test results anyway. They believed that the numbers were being padded to make it look like the virus was far more contagious than it actually was. Of course, it was fact-checked and proven to be false, but it didn't matter. Eventually, after a lot of trial and error and going back and forth with safety precautions and the lack of necessary medical equipment for those in dire need, we landed on mask wearing as a simple, safe way to ease the spread of COVID-19 so that people could still go to work and leave the house safely when it warranted it. Mask up and wash your hands thoroughly when you're done. Use hand sanitizer in between. Don't touch your face. Keep 6 feet apart. Keep 6 feet apart and wear your fucking mask. Simple, right? Not inconvenient, really, right? Except apparently it was, and it started with supposed security concerns revolving around mask wearing, especially for small children. Masks make it easier for children to get kidnapped? I'm not really sure how that is, considering you should probably keep your kids at home as much as it can be helped. But the biggest concern to mask wearing was that it was somehow harmful to your health. It made it harder to breathe. People's rights were being taken away because they were being forced to wear masks, and that it was leading to government control. The government wanted to control all of us by forcing us into masks. Masks that actually help slow the spread of a highly contagious, sometimes deadly virus. When in reality, it's the fact that most people don't want to be inconvenienced in any way, even if it means protecting and helping others. Even now, we see people spouting the same nonsense, and it has even escalated to violence, as shown by numerous videos on the internet. As if this wasn't enough to deal with, everyone was already on edge when George Floyd was killed by police in custody on May 25th. Officer Derek Chauvin of the Minneapolis PD kept his knee on Floyd's neck for at least 8 minutes and 15 seconds, in which time Mr. Floyd repeatedly gasped for air after complaining that he was unable to breathe before being put on the ground, where he expressed the fear that he was going to die and called out for his mother. Prior to that, on March 13th, 26-year-old Breonna Taylor was killed by Louisville police after serving a no-knock warrant to her apartment, where they forced entry and were met by Breonna's then-boyfriend. He fired a warning shot thinking they were intruders and was met with a hailstorm of bullets, several of which struck Breonna Taylor, killing her. In both these instances, the police were at fault. If you look at the evidence in the cases and what we know now, it is apparent that the police were the guilty party here. But that's not how they looked at it, and it's not how supporters of the Thin Blue Line looked at it either. But those of us with at least half a brain and compassionate empathy for our fellow man did not. The BLM movement made a huge resurgence, and protests began to form as a result of these murders. Of course, with protesting comes marching, and with marching comes lots of people all crowded together in the middle of a pandemic. But most of them masked up and tried to do their part while still casting light on the fact that people of color are still being murdered by police at an enormous rate. And with protests of these nature, there are usually counter-protesters. In this case, a bunch of white, racist, MAGA-gobbling twits and their dick extenders. Guns. Lots of armed citizens, quote-unquote. Because of this, some of these protests turned into riots. Antifa was brought into the picture by the far right, and then came the theories that protesters were being paid by the likes of George Soros and other rich Democrats. Even fake Craigslist ads popped up where Antifa was supposedly willing to pay protesters to fuck stuff up at different protests. But here's the thing. Antifa isn't some company that thrives on chaos and bedlam. It's an ideology and literally means anti-fascist. The fear-mongering of violent protests in certain areas never happened, and when it did turn violent, it wasn't usually started by those that were there to peacefully protest. QAnon and Antifa adherents clashed, and with good reason. one side wants fascists to go fuck themselves and for people to have equity and not be killed for the color of their skin, where the other side just makes up stories about the left to stir the pot and start a war. It was prime time for it, too, considering that it was an election year, and a lot of QAnon kooks are also MAGA kooks, and they could feel the power of a racist, white, misogynist, wannabe dictator being taken away from them. Yet they think the Democrats are wannabe communists, and that's somehow far worse. But they continue to screw the pooch on their end, especially when it comes down to campaigning and readying themselves for the election in November. While people are crying to end lockdown and let them go back to restaurants and get their hair done, the president and his administration campaigned, continuing to spread misinformation about anything and everything, and tried their damnedest to sway things in their favor with fake ballot boxes, screwing around with the Postal Service so that mail-in ballots were harder to receive and be sent back out, and convincing their own constituents to not vote by mail-in, but show up in person. It became a shit show of whiny baby tantrum proportions, and when it came down to it, everything that Trump tried to do to ensure he got elected again backfired on his ass when Joe Biden won the election. Then the voter fraud claims started because no one in the Trump administration or the Republican Party has any idea how our government works. Meanwhile, the conspiracy theories are still flowing, and more ignorant people are climbing on board the crazy train, and they are turning violent because of it. The whole election was a sham. Recount again. Georgia can't be blue. They threw out ballots. Trump won. Blah, blah, blah. Shut the fuck up. You lost. Accept it. But they won't. And because they won't, things have gotten far more troublesome. Trump is pardoning heinous people left and right. Mitch McConnell is fucking us with $600 stimulus checks while pocketing all that he can and lining the pockets of his rich conservative friends. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was replaced by Amy Coney Barrett, who is a nightmare straight out of Handmaid's Tale. And we now have a QAnon supporter, Marjorie Taylor Greene, in Congress. These unfounded conspiracy theories have infiltrated every part of our government and the country's citizens, though a lot of us know bullshit when we see it. But what do we do about it? We have a tendency to turn a blind eye to such things. That doesn't affect me. But is that really true? You have the privilege to think that, but look at all the harm and violence it has created. It has allowed people like Trump, McConnell, Perdue, and Loeffler to continue screwing over the people of this country while getting richer with their 1% buds. It perpetuates violence in the form of racism, hate crimes, destruction of property, physical assault, and even murder. Kyle Rittenhouse is a good example of this, among others, where he decided to take the law into his own hands and cross state lines to stick his nose into a protest over police brutality, where he ended up killing 2 people and severely injuring another. Why? Because Trump and the conspiracies he allows to go unchecked and even adheres to himself. People are struggling, starving, and dying, but all this country can do is point fingers at other people and cry about the terrible things being done to them that don't even exist, but were born from the minds of fucked up individuals that only want to divide and conquer. And I'm sure 2021 won't be short of more bullshit conspiracy theories. I myself love a good conspiracy theory, but not one that actively hurts other people. I really hope that evidence of aliens is actually true and they come get those of us who have had it with the stupidity on this planet. But I know that's wishful thinking. Our work is not yet finished, and we have to band together to actively try and squash these harmful theories and rhetoric before it's too late and we're all so ignorant to what is actually going on that we kill ourselves so that the government doesn't have to. But I think this is where I end things for tonight. I could talk about this till I was red in the face and spitting nails over how angry the state of the world makes me, but I don't want to do that to myself or you. Instead, I will leave you with a bit of advice. Be good to one another. Love your fellow human. Use your head. Read, research, and resist. And for God's sake, never go quiet. Be loud and obnoxious so that the people can hear you. Don't stay silent in the face of injustice. Just make sure you've got the facts first so you can shut them down like John Ossoff continues to shut down Purdue on Fox News. Let's hope there are enough of us that voted blue so we can actually see positive, intelligent change. All of this talk of conspiracy theories has made me kind of tired. So I'm going to go ahead and end tonight's episode. And until our next visit, lock your doors, salt your windows, and remember, it's okay to sleep with the lights on. Aha! You thought you heard the last of me tonight. but I just wanted to step back in here for a second and check on everybody, see how you're doing, how the beginnings of 2021 are treating you. If you want, you come find us on Facebook and on Instagram, and we're on TikTok now. All of it's under the Occult Archives. You should be able to type it in and just find me that way. And let me know how you're doing. Let's start a dialogue. Let's talk. Let's be friends. Because I know that a lot of us need it right now, and I'm kind of enjoying throwing these little chit-chatties at the end that's unscripted. I love you guys. I hope you have